We always cover this part, what my crop insurance doesn't cover. Land that hasn't been planted or harvested within the last 3 years, excluding CRP. That's a big one. If you let some ground just sit idle, if it's in dry land hay, maybe you just had it come out of CRP and it was a little piece and you never touched it for over 2 years since it came out. That's not insurable unless we do a written agreement. So make sure you talk to us about anything you're going to do for the current crop year before this deadline. Chemical damage, it's a big one. You can't go spray your crop with Roundup, obviously, and get paid on the crop insurance side. And then fire not caused by natural causes. This is probably the biggest issue that we have come up, is that this is a man-caused fire. So if you're out in your pickup driving through the field and it starts a fire and burns the whole block up, if your combine starts a fire out in the field and it burns a whole unit or enough of your unit up that it puts it into a loss, your crop insurance does not pay on man-caused fires. So that would be without hail insurance or without a fire policy on the backside of this, you would basically receive zero loss payment and have lost a whole unit of crop at least on that scenario. So first off, make sure your custom cutters carry good liability insurance, because not only could this be an issue on your farm, if it burns over into the neighbors, you would be liable for that as well if they don't have good liability insurance. And also make sure you either add private hail or at least a field fire policy on top of your federal crop insurance before you start harvesting, or you will not receive a payment from a combine caused fire. One other important thing to note is that state hail insurance is a hail only policy. So if you take out state hail, you don't get any fire coverage with that as well. So like on our insurance, if you take $100 worth of private hail insurance out, that also is $100 worth of fire insurance that you would get at harvest time. State hail is hail only. And then any acreage in which good farming practices aren't used, that they're going to become stickier on in the future, it sounds like. But if you're really not attempting to do a good job of farming to maintain at least a reasonably average yield, and maybe not fertilizing period when all your neighbors do, not spraying, that sort of thing, then they will have the ability to deny you a loss on that. More government regulations. Neither the insurance agency or the provider can forgive interest charges on a late payment. So this is a big one. If you don't pay your premium on time and then some interest tax on, and then you take that old bill and pay your premium off of that without the interest on it, and then they'll send you another bill if it's not too late when you paid that. If you receive another bill then with like $20 worth of what basically was interest on it, and you don't pay that by the termination date, you will be disqualified for crop insurance for the coming crop year, and we cannot forgive it. It could even be $1.50 worth of interest in this scenario, and we could not forgive it on our end because of some discounting issues. So no matter what, if you get late on your premium payment, make sure you call our office and talk to us about the balance that you owe. It would even be good to come in and we'll mail that off for you, certified mail, to make sure that gets to the crop insurance place in time. Losses must be reported within 72 hours of discovering a loss. You have 15 days after the end of the insurance period to file a claim, which for wheat and barley is October 31st, or when you harvest the unit. So this is the most important thing to understand on this, is that if you finish harvesting a unit on August 31st, and then you wait all the way to the end to harvest, let's say harvest stretches out until the middle of September to turn the loss in, technically they could deny your claim on that first unit that you harvested because we're 15 days past the time you harvested it, or the insurance ended on that unit when harvest was complete on it. So if you get to the beginning of harvest and think there's even a chance of having a claim, it's always better to turn it in and sign off on it later. It's just one piece of paper if you don't want to go through the loss process. So moral of the story, once you even begin to estimate that you might have a loss, please turn it in and we can always sign off on it later. Agents can no longer be involved in the adjustment process. That changed probably at least 5 years ago. So we cannot be in the same room with you and the adjuster when working on your federal crop claim. That's a major violation of the government's portion of the federal crop policy. So what do you need approval to do? Obviously destroying a crop that's not harvested. Before you do that, even if you get something that's completely wiped out by hail, make sure you get an appraisal done on that before haying it or destroying it, so that we can get you a loss payment for one, probably on it, but also if there's still 5 bushels of wheat sitting out there, you just don't want to harvest it, at least we can put that on your crop insurance as a yield and not just get a plugged, possibly zero yield in there. Grazing or haying is another thing. If you want to switch from what you consider to be a grain crop to a haying crop, we need to get an appraisal before you do that. Any failure to get approval on any of these practices will be an assigned yield for that year and no loss payment will be awarded. So make sure you get a hold of the adjuster before doing anything that's out of the ordinary with your crop. It's absolutely critical that every person with a share in your operation is listed on your crop insurance application and that there are no errors in the Social Security or EIN numbers. That's another big one. We want to make sure that everyone that has a share in your operation is listed. If not, that could disqualify you for their share of your loss payment and also possibly disqualify you for disaster payments at the FSA. What crops are insurable through multi-peril insurance? Pasture and rangeland, which is a fall deadline thing, we'll have another presentation on that come this fall. Wheat, barley, oats, canola, peas, lentils, and camelina. Like we said, chickpeas have been added into here as well. And then if some of these crops, even though they're not insurable in our counties, there's other ones. If you're in Hill County, we just covered kind of Tool and Glacier here. You might have safflower or something over there as well. If it's not insurable through us, we can still get it insured. We just have to do that before this March 15th deadline. So if you're going to be doing any crops that aren't by default covered in our county, let us know. We'll send in a written agreement, it's called, and we can get that coverage more than likely added. But we need to do that early, at least a week before this deadline, preferably a month before would be better. So forage seeding. If you guys go seed some hay ground or equip or something, we can actually insure the value or the cost of that seed in a way. And then as we go through the next crop year, come next spring, if you seed it this spring and it hasn't come up by next spring, or if it winter kills next fall, we can get you a payment on that. And all other crops that need to be covered by an app through the FSA or through a written agreement with us. What to check on your apps? Are your tax ID and Social Security numbers correct? That's the biggest thing. Like we said, all the shares in your entities need to be listed on there, and we need to make absolutely for sure that the Social Security numbers are correct for each one of those individuals. So it's not only listing the names, it's making sure that we have the individual's information correct. That can create some issues as well if we don't have that. So has anything changed with your policy? Basically, the biggest changes that usually happen is maybe someone died, maybe one of your shares had passed away. It maybe is changing from an individual to a trust or an estate because of a death, or maybe incorporated during the year. We need to know those things because we have to match the FSA on all of this stuff. So have you selected the program and level you wish to be in for your crop policy? And are there any other crops you'd like to add that aren't insurable or maybe aren't listed on your application? Well, usually we'll list every crop in the county that you possibly could insure at least a pretty low level, so that if you guys decide after this deadline that you're going to go out and, let's say, seed canola and you never have before, at least it's listed on there so we have insurance to qualify for FSA linkage. Most of you received in the mail this checklist. Has anything changed in your entity structure? We need to know, like we said, if you're adding or removing a share in like your corporation or partnership, if someone died and now it's changing to an estate, if any of your landlords died that you're actually doing the crop insurance for, please let us know, not only on your policy, but on all those other entities that you're signing off on as well. Do you understand enterprise versus optional units? We went through that previous slides here, but please let us know. If you don't understand that and you want to consider doing it, we really need to explain that to you before you just choose it blindly. So if you decided on a unit structure for each crop, please just check the box as to whether you'd want OU, which is optional units, or EU for wheat, barley, and canola on your policy. In any counties do you farm, do you have less than 2 years of history for any crop? This isn't only just history, but less than 2 years of experience, I guess it should say. So if you grew canola once back in the 90s, there may not even be history of it in your crop insurance policy, but we need to know that so we can get you a new producer exception, is called, on your crop insurance. So if any of the crops listed over on the right column over here, if any of these crops you have less than 2 years of experience ever growing in the county, and this isn't just your entity, it's you or anyone involved in your entity has less than 2 years of experience with these crops, please check it over here. Obviously, a simple example of this would be dry peas. If you've never ever grown peas, just check that. And canola, if you had 1 year of history and it was back in the 90s, check canola and write 1 year sometime in the 90s, just so we know. Have you picked a level for each crop on your policy? Do you understand how revenue protection works, which we went through in the previous slides as well? If you don't understand that, we'll give you a call and explain it, because that's a pretty important component of your crop insurance to understand. on the back side of this sheet, there's some really important things to review before this deadline as well. So are you going to be doing any new breaking this year? New breaking would be anything that hadn't been farmed before, obviously, which would be like we talked here, native grassland. Hay ground that's been in dry land hay for more than 2 years that you're now breaking out and are going to farm. And then CRP. So if you check CRP, tell us the acres and the year that the CRP contract expired. If we get more than 2 years out from when that CRP contract expired, that's now considered new breaking. So it's not insurable without some additional paperwork here. The number of acres is incredibly important as well too, because if it's over 320, or if it's in a map area, a soil type that we can't do in-house here, we have to send that to the government by this March 15th deadline. So if you don't let us know by March 15th and you have a whole bunch of acres of new breaking over 320, it's just not going to be insurable for this coming crop year, which can lead to all kinds of problems at the FSA and obviously on your insurance end as well. So let us know whatever you're doing that might involve some kind of new breaking, and we'll discuss that with you to make sure before this deadline we have that covered. Will you be growing any crops that aren't insurable through us? You may not know what all's insurable in your county, so if it's something questionable, just check yes here and write it over there. It may not be just these crops. It might be something different, like whatever you guys come up with, basically, that would be a crop that's not, that you know is possibly not insurable on your crop insurance anyways. Please check yes and list it over on the right hand side so we can get that sorted out here as well. That has to be done by this March 15th deadline too. Do you have a malt contract for 2014, and do you wish to insure it? At the very least, if you're just waffling back and forth in this and considering the malt coverage, do the qualifier for this deadline. In other words, prove to us that you grew malt in the past and delivered 75% of your contracts. And then if you don't want to insure it later, we just won't get your contracts at acreage reporting time. You're not committed yet on this, but if you don't do the qualifying part, you don't have the option. So, and have you added any land in your operation this year? If yes, fill in the appropriate information. This could be either lease ground that you picked up or land that you purchased. We need to know which county it's in, and then the total cropland acres. If it's, we can go up to 640 cropland acres, and you still would just get the simple average of all your other yields on your farm. In other words, we could use kind of your other yield history to give you a guarantee on your new crop ground. If we get over 640 acres, then we have to send some information into the government to have them determine what yield we can give you. And if you're over 2,000 acres, your only option is to use the county average for that year. This is total cropland, not total acres you're going to seed. So please let us know the total cropland that you picked up. Here's your application you probably received from us in the mail. As you can see, here's the crops that you had last year and what levels that you were insured in. Up here is the main producer on your farm and your tax ID number for that entity. This might be a corporation instead of an individual, and this would be the last four of the EIN number instead of the Social Security number. In this scenario, this is Wendy's stuff, so Wendy's the lead on this on the farm. I'm her spouse, and so underneath the spouse here, we would have my tax ID number, the last four listed on here. And then all of the SBIs, if this was a corporation, should be listed down in this spot, which there's nothing here because we're not incorporated for the farm portion of this. But as you can see, everybody under your corporation should be listed then down on that line. The next page has some questions which you should go through and read and answer. Basically, if you're indebted to the federal government, especially on the crop insurance side, you don't qualify for insurance then if you got past the termination date. If you've been convicted of planting, growing, or harvesting any controlled substance, so if you got caught growing marijuana in your basement and it was a felony conviction, you would not qualify for crop insurance then for 5 years. And just go through these, make sure that you don't fall into any of these categories, which you shouldn't. One of them would be, do you have any like insurance on the above crops? That means, do you have another federal crop policy for the same land somewhere for these crops? You can't double insure anything, so that would be what that question pertains to. I'm going to skip the county rate sheet because we are going to individual farm quoting for most of you guys. So this next page shows your full farm quote. Just a real quick explanation as to how these full farm quote sheets work. Here's all of your units listed over here. So this is unit 301 barley in this example. these are in enterprise units, which is what EU means on this quote sheet. So most of you guys we sent an optional and an enterprise unit quote sheet to. If it says EU on your sheet, that means that's the enterprise unit sheet. If it said OU, that'd be optional units over here. We quoted all of these, whether they're shared or not, at 100%, so that you could compare unit to unit what your premium would be on a 100% basis. In this land, in our scenario, we actually have a 70% share here. So in the end, we're only going to pay 70% of this premium and get 70% of the coverage on this shared unit. But just so you guys understand how we did that, all this is quoted on a 100% basis. Then over here's your premium at these different levels. So for this piece of ground, we have a 28 bushel average on recrop barley. We choose the 70% level, we can come across here in enterprise units and see that would cost us $3 an acre, and the coverage would be $78 an acre, which is based off of that 403 base price. Down here then would be summer fallow barley. You can see you have a 39 bushel average here, so at 70%. We'd be guaranteed $110 an acre then in this scenario. So this lets you just see as you go up levels what your premium is going to be for each unit on your farm. It's also a good way to go through and look at your approved versus rate yields for each unit. Like we talked about, if any of those get spread out, if your rate yield's quite a bit lower than your approved yield, you'll notice this premium is going to be substantially probably higher if it gets too low over here versus the rest of the units on your farm. So if you're going to seed, if you kind of know where you're going to seed each crop, you can go through and kind of write your acres in here, and then this will give you an idea what it's going to cost per acre per unit on your farm. Here's a pea example. You can't do enterprise units on peas, so this is optional units, and you can see how much more expensive that is. It's going to cost you $12 an acre for the 70% level on peas here, and you'd be guaranteed $161. And then anything that's a 2200, so this says 0022, those are highlighted on your guys' sheets, I believe, but those are your malt units. So if you go across there to add the malt coverage to my barley in this example, for my recrop unit would be $4.50 an acre, and it's going to add about $60 an acre worth of coverage if I had enough contracts to satisfy to get all the way up to what my APH is, and if my contract was $2 above the base price is what that quote's for. So this is just zoomed in on here, just showing you the levels, the guarantee, which is your bushel guarantee per acre, and then the coverage and the premium over there next to it. Key crop insurance points: report all your information well before the deadline. That's probably one of the biggest ones for us. Most of our mistakes, probably 90% of them, are the ones that we have somebody come in the day of the deadline with their maps for us to input it in the computer, and we have to plug that in there as quickly as possible, crank that report out, have you look at it and sign off on it. That's always when mistakes happen, is when we wait till the end. So please get your stuff done as soon as you're done seeding. I know the paperwork's not fun to do, but it would help you from an accuracy standpoint, and it really helps us get your stuff done in an accurate manner here as well. Obviously, double check all the paperwork you get from us. Like, we'll send you out that schedule, and usually attached to that we'll write on there, you have this many total acres of recrop and summer fallow wheat, and this many total acres of recrop and summer fallow barley. At the very least, have a good number in your head of what your total acres are of each crop. That would at least let us know that we're not missing a bunch of land. But ideally, go through and check each section or unit on your map and make sure we have the shares right on the fields, and that it doesn't appear that we're missing anything. So talk to your agent before sales closing. This is a really important deadline for making all kinds of changes, whether it's a death, or a marriage maybe happened, or maybe you got married and you didn't let us know. We need to get this all set up by this deadline, or we can run into some serious ramifications at the FSA and on your claims process. New breaking we need to know about, added land, and growing crops not insurable in the county. Those are all really important by this deadline. So thanks a lot for taking the time to watch this presentation. I hope you guys got some good out of it. We would love to hear your input on whether this web format or not is going to help you out. But this slide was obviously done for our meeting, but please, instead of don't leave without signing your applications, please get your applications back to us as soon as possible. And give us a call if you have any questions. We appreciate your time, and thanks for watching our presentation.